Well, good morning, folks. This is going to be a great Leading Your Best Life. Money, money, finance, money. We're talking with Stacey Varsani up in Singapore from Hadouken. Stacey, welcome aboard to Leading Your Best Life.
Thanks, Leigh. Very happy to be here.
Fantastic. Now, Stacey, Leading Your Best Life really is about entrepreneurs, business people, leading their best lives. And you've already told me today you've done some tennis. You're going to do some exercise this afternoon. I know you've got your kids, you've got your consulting business. So we're going to delve into that. And of course, we met each other via our mutual friend, David Horlock. And via that, we've done a range of exciting things helping businesses. But look, before we get into all of that, let's talk about the Stacey Varsani background. Where have you come from? I know there's an accent there. So that accent and Singapore. Tell me the Stacey Varsani journey.
Well, my journey started in New Jersey in the US. I was born near New Brunswick, which is near Rutgers University. And after that, I moved down to North Carolina when I went to university. I went to Duke. I would say most of my decisions in life have been based on where I want to be geographically. So I really wanted to be away from, I love the seasons, which is something I've realized since living in Singapore. I do miss having seasons, but I wanted to get away from the really cold, snowy weather of New Jersey to the relatively warmer weather of North Carolina, which is why I chose to go to Duke. Then when I was at Duke, I ended up doing a study abroad, moving over to London just for a semester. It was not really a planned thing. I just suddenly realized that all of my best friends were going various places that term, either in the US or abroad, and I didn't want to be the only one left on campus. So I went to London for a semester, absolutely loved it, loved the culture. I really felt like it was kind of my place, my kind of people. So as soon as I graduated, for my undergrad, I moved back to London and I did my master's there. And I basically just did whatever I could do to stay in London. I did my master's, and then I was lucky enough to get nominated for a scholarship program, a government scholarship program there, which was basically for academics who wanted to commercialize technologies. And that was very new to me at the time. I didn't really learn much about business. I had a very basic economics course at Duke, but otherwise I was focused completely on, well, engineering and the arts, which are two very different areas. But those were the areas that I was really into. And when I was at UCL doing my master's, they had a program for where you learned how to pitch businesses, and that really got me interested in the business world, mergers and acquisitions. So I did that. And then I did the scholarship program, which was again about business planning. How do you turn these academic ideas? How do you commercialize them? And it was the early days of spinning things out of university at the time. And then after that, I had to get a real job for the first time. And I really, really wanted to go into engineering. All my degrees are all in engineering. If I'd stayed in the US, I probably would have gone on to do a higher degree in electrical engineering. But I wanted to stay in London, and my choices for a fresh grad who needed a work permit were really accounting or investment banking. So I went to KPMG, and they had an IT advisory department, which I thought was a bit more aligned with my background, a bit techie. I had done quite a bit of programming at that point. So I did that for a few years. I became qualified as a chartered accountant. I was not a big fan of auditing. I started in financial audit as part of the graduate program, went into a lot of IT audit. I think I kind of became the departmental IT audit expert somehow. So I really was quite keen to do something else after qualifying, and I was looking at mergers and acquisitions positions. I didn't have really any background in it. I had done a little bit of work at KPMG and M&A from the IT side, but I was lucky enough to have befriended a recruiter and she put me forward for some really interesting jobs that I may not otherwise have gotten interviews for. And one of them was Intertek. And they were specifically looking for somebody who had a chartered accounting qualification to join their mergers and acquisitions team. So I started working for them, and that was fantastic. It was I think it was a really great introduction into the world, or kind of a trial by fire in many ways, really, because we had a small team. There were only 4 of us at the time, and we were acquiring about 20 companies a year. So each one of us had to really manage everything from finding targets, evaluating, some of the companies that approached us, all the way through to, initial letter of intent, negotiations, due diligence, to closing the deal. The one thing we didn't get involved in was integration, and except for when the global financial crisis hit. So in 2000, well, I joined them in 2007. For the first almost a year I was there, we were quite busy. And then with the global financial crisis, we decided to just stop the acquisitions and focus on integration. And that was really eye-opening for me, because I finally saw kind of all the pieces that we were leaving behind for other people to sort out. And there were so many, and so many acquisitions, that a lot of times they didn't all get sorted out. So we were involved in integration, and things went a lot more smoothly after that. We really saw what a difference it made when it was project managed. Not to say it wasn't being done that way before, but we were not involved. And some teams may be stronger than other teams in terms of the integration. So that was really interesting. After that, Intertek moved me to Houston, Texas, actually, after I said, you can move me anywhere in the world except Texas.
Really?
And that's where I was sent. Well, I think I had a bit of a bad impression of it. I'd been there. I was managing 2 acquisitions that we made in Texas, in Houston. And when I went over there, it was just a few days. I got, taken around to these big chain restaurants, and it didn't seem like a very interesting place to me. But actually, once we moved there, we really enjoyed it. It was before kids, so we did a lot of going out. We lived in an area with lots of nice restaurants and cafes, so it was a good time. We had a lot of friends there that actually I had known at KPMG. They were doing secondments in London, and they had all returned to the Houston office. So after maybe the first few months in Houston, I suddenly realized we had this big friend group there already.
Mm.
So it was a good time, and I was working for the head of Intertek's commodities business, and I was managing the financial planning and analysis department. So doing a lot of, again, still involved with we weren't really doing many acquisitions in that business, but I was involved with evaluating investments, so similar types of work in that way, some negotiations, and it was a part of the business I didn't know much about, because that business was not really growing by acquisition at the time. So this is the oil and gas testing and inspection side of the business. So it was a steep learning curve for me, but very, very interesting. And after, I think, about 18 months over there, a position in Singapore opened up. We needed someone to manage the Southeast Asia business.
Mm-hmm.
So I put my hands up for that. And thankfully enough, my boss supported me, and we moved over here. And it was a place I'd always wanted to be, always wanted to try out. And in fact, when we were in London, there was some talk about maybe me moving to Singapore instead of Texas. So I think I already had that in my head a bit. So yeah, we came out here. I was initially managing the Southeast Asia business for Intertek. Initially, it was just the oil and gas side, but then we reorganized so that all the business lines were brought together under the geographical leadership. And that, again, was very interesting. I got to learn a lot more about our textile business, electronics testing, consumer goods testing, which are some of the bigger areas over here. Oil and gas minerals are still the massive areas in this part of the world. But also, yeah, there's all kinds of other business lines, transportation, testing vehicles. There's a lot going on, and we had a lot of projects to set up new labs. It was very interesting work. Eventually, I went back completely to the oil and gas side. So I was put in charge of the global oil and gas business. And that is when I think I only did that for about 6 months. That was when I really started to feel a bit of conflict with family life come in.
I was
So,
going to say, at some point, you've picked up a husband along the way there somewhere, and
yes, yeah, I
possibly
got
had
married.
a child or two. So, so,
Yes.
so now you're balancing these things out, and obviously your husband was able to move from Houston or London to Houston, and then to Singapore. So he's able to be flexible in his work somehow as well. So how did you manage all of that?
Well, we weren't actually married when we were in London. We weren't even engaged. So he actually was not keen on Houston either. But I'm very grateful that he decided to move there without even seeing it. He had never been there before. He came over to Houston with me, and we ended up getting married in a courthouse so that he could get a green card.
Oh, I see. Right.
We were initially hoping that he could, just get a job there, but actually he was finding it quite tough interviewing, and he didn't have, the US university on the resume or any kind of background in oil and gas. And that was really making things a bit challenging.
Mm-hmm.
So we were gonna get married anyway. So we decided to do it in a rush in Houston. And he was then a house husband for a while. So he, was at the pool, watching movies, going shopping. I mean, it was
You couldn't let him do that for too long, obviously. It's
yeah,
a
yeah.
bad
Couldn't
habit to
let
get
that go
into.
on for too long. And that was before kids too. So, really a good life. And then when we moved to Singapore, he had been working, we actually met at KPMG in London.
Mm-hmm.
He also worked in the IT advisory group, and he left KPMG around the time that I went to Intertek. He went to Barclays. So he actually finished his accounting qualification at a bank. And when we moved to Singapore, he started interviewing and eventually started working for Credit Suisse about 9 months after we moved here. And
Okay.
around that time, I think maybe it was about a year or so later. So Jay eventually went to Standard Chartered, which is where he still is now. And Intertek asked us if we would move to Chicago. And at that point, so that was around the time that I took on the global oil and gas role. And I ended up saying no, and they let us stay in Singapore. I was managing the business from Singapore, and that was mainly because Jay had taken the time off of his career. He had really just gotten back into it, and
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to move us again. And then we're back in the US, and he has to
Plus,
start.
Chicago weather is not the same as Singapore weather. You're going to be wearing
Yeah,
a
I
lot more
don't think
clothes.
I've only been to Chicago once, in relation to an acquisition, and yeah, it was very, very cold,
Mm, 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 mm.
very harsh weather.
So when did you segue into setting up your consulting business, Hadouken?
So I set up Hadouken about 10 years ago now, uh,
Mm-hmm.
10 and a half years ago. Basically, I started running this oil and gas business from Singapore, and it was very challenging, to be honest. I had a couple of people here, but most of my team was based in Houston and
Mm.
Geneva and London. I think there were a couple in the Middle East. But it would have made more sense, I think, for me to be in a central time zone somewhere. and I
Mhm.
was doing a lot of travel. So I had my son around that just before I took on that role. He was maybe about a year old, and I just took him everywhere with me, which was a bit crazy, but I also didn't want to not see him. I was breastfeeding, so that was a factor. So I flew, we had a live-in helper at the time, as many people do in Singapore. So if I
Mhm.
was traveling around Asia, I would take her with me. If I was traveling in Europe or the US, I would fly my mom out to look after my son. And what ended happening, at first, my mom was loving it. She got to hang out with the grandson. When I had trips to London, my mother-in-law would also meet up with her and they would look after him together. But my work hours were insane. I was, I'd be in the office in London until 8 p.m. I would be on calls with the US then until about midnight. Up early again the next morning. So my mom eventually found it just she was getting a bit burnt out. I mean,
Mhm.
there was barely time to get a meal. And my son was not an easy child to look after. He was quite an intense baby. He would not go
Mhm.
to sleep unless you kind of pushed him back and forth like that in the stroller. If
Mhm.
you stopped for a second, he would be up. So my mom actually, we were on this trip and it was in London and then we went to Geneva. And in Geneva, I had planned some extra time after I finished up all my work there on the weekend just for us to hang out. And we were at a cafe and she looked at me and said, "You know what? I think you would really enjoy being a stay-at-home mom." And
Mhm.
I looked at her like, "Are you nuts? I love
Mhm.
my job.
Mhm.
This is, what are you talking about?"
Mhm.
But then I got back to Singapore with my jet lagged toddler, or 1 year old, I think he was at that time. And he was up at 3 a.m. So I thought, "Oh, I'll just get some work done, talk to some of the guys in the US." So I'm on calls. And I hung up the phone and I just thought, what am I doing? This is,
Mhm.
just this is not sustainable. And I'm not really, this time spent, yes, I'm dragging my son around the world, but this is by no means quality time with anybody,
Mhm.
with my mother, with my son, with my
Mhm.
mother-in-law.
Mhm.
So I kind of, just in that moment, I wrote an email to my boss and to the CEO and said, "Look, I will stay around as long as it takes to get a replacement, but really, I just think I need the time for my family at this point."
Mhm.
So it took another 6 months for me to leave, but I think it was really, really worth it. And I did plan to take 6 months to a year off completely. I was quite burnt out. I'd lost a lot of weight. But I really quickly realized I'm not good at just relaxing. I'm
Mhm.
good at relaxing if I know that there's stuff on either side of it, that it's like
Mhm.
contained amount of time. But my visions of me hanging out by the pool, reading books and going for long runs, I mean, I just guess it wasn't meant to be. But I was fortunate as well in that a private equity company approached me to do some work. I think about 2 weeks into my career break. So I set up Hadouken actually just thinking it would be for that one piece of work. I thought it was just more professional to contract through a company. And then it just led on to other work. So I was helping that particular company find acquisition targets around Asia.
Mhm.
And one of the targets didn't work out, but they were a very promising company, and they asked me if I would help them grow in this region, enter Singapore and grow in other industries and geographies. And it just, yeah, it just kind of built from there. Mostly just ex-colleagues who were asking me to do work or who had referred me to other companies to do work.
Okay, why don't we, while we're doing that, just to show people the website as to what we're talking about here. Now, you know me, I get the pronunciation. Is it Hadouken, Hadouken,
It is Hadouken, so doe like a deer.
a doe like a deer, Hadouken. And there you
Yeah.
go, empowering organizational resilience. Um, and there's finance transformation, interim support, business turnaround and sales growth, ESG and supply chain management, quality compliance and risk management, mergers and acquisition support. So it really does tap in on that whole journey in and around finance and mergers and acquisition and compliance, all those things that you've spent all that time in London and Houston and other places doing. So tell me a bit about the business, and when you talk about this, knowing what success looks like and what you mean by driving impactful outcomes.
Well, the business actually, I started it just thinking it would be M&A support, so the category all the way on the right. That's what I was really focusing on initially. But as you know, Lee, in your own work, I'm sure you meet with somebody and then what they actually need is something completely different. So that's when I started doing more of the business turnaround work in particular, and the finance work as well, since my background is accounting, FP&A. So it led into other directions.
Just on that, CFO is Chief Financial Officer, but FP&A is
Financial planning and analysis.
financial planning and analysis. Okay, thank
Yes.
you.
So the department that would kind of evaluate investments, basically look at different numbers in different ways. Anytime somebody has a question about, how is this product doing versus this one? And yeah, there's obviously a lot of tools that can really make that a much more powerful function right now.
And as you say, well, you with your background can look at those numbers, spreadsheets, profit and loss, and analysis, and go, well, this is what it's telling us. So the
Yes,
the
I love numbers.
CEO and others can go, what are these numbers telling us?
Yeah, it's all about telling a story with the numbers, and I think it's become a bit of a buzzword lately, the storytelling, but that's really what it is all about. And I
Yeah.
think people who are able to translate, what something that is very dry, like numbers, like a spreadsheet, and tell a story with it and really build a roadmap out of that, action plans. So what does this mean for us? What do we
Mm.
need to do? What do we want to do? How do we
Yeah.
measure?
Well, we talk about financial literacy, numerical literacy. Some people look at numbers and they just glaze over. Others look at numbers and immediately can see the story and the patterns, and in fact the action plans, and as you say, financial strategies, and how you can go, okay, well, if your business goal is A, based on this spreadsheet, these are the three actions I suggest you guys make. And obviously, so the whole idea there is, how do we create value? How do we add value to this company so that it's worth more in 3 weeks or 90 days or 12 months than it is now? And clearly that's a set of skills. As you say, a master's degree, an engineering brain looking at numbers, quite a gift, which got me thinking, even back then, your parents, what were your father and mother, how did they breed a person that came from New Jersey with that engineering numerical brain?
Well, my dad is a chemist, so
Science brain.
yeah, he managed research and development departments at some of the big pharma companies.
All
So
right.
actually, Claritin, the allergy medicine, is one of the ones that he developed when he was at Sharing Plow
Okay.
with his team. And there was always kind of a focus on STEM, I think, science and
Hmm.
technology, engineering, as being very valuable career wise. And actually I was a bit resistant to that. I mean, I did want to become a doctor initially. So when I joined Duke, I was pre-med. But at the time I was very, very into the arts. And my parents were really, really not didn't so much see the value in me majoring in something like, I think I wanted to major in art history initially.
Hmm. No, that wouldn't have,
So
your father, I can imagine, would not
yeah,
have been going, what are you on about? Art history compared to science, technology, engineering, mathematics. So two different universes. And your mother, well, was she very much a science, maths person as well, or was she an artist?
my mom actually was more artsy. So I
Hmm.
remember growing up, she would draw pictures for us and these very like detailed pictures. I would tell her to draw, give her anything and everything to draw, and she would add it into these pictures, and I loved it.
Mm.
So she was a stay-at-home mom, so I spent a lot of time with her. I think was always supportive of me, not to say my dad was also very supportive of me. But my mom probably didn't push me so much in a certain direction.
Sure. And you had brothers and sisters. Your mother
Yeah,
had
I
a
have a
team to
little
look
brother.
after.
Yeah, a little brother and a little sister.
Okay, great. A little brother and little. So you're the eldest. You're the
I'm the
responsible one.
eldest, yeah. And my
Okay. So,
sister became the doctor.
oh really? Oh, there you go. And would the
Yeah,
brother
she's
become
a
an artist,
psychiatrist.
a psychiatrist? The brother. Oh, she's
Yeah,
a psychiatrist.
she's a psychiatrist. My brother's a programmer for a hedge fund.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, both doing very well. But yeah,
The,
we I guess all went in the
the high achieving family.
yeah, we all went in the science and technology direction. But I did try to get into the arts. I actually, when I went to Duke, I signed up for this it's kind of a 1 semester intensive program called the Focus program at Duke.
Hmm.
And they're really amazing programs. You get to have these small seminar classes with professors, whereas otherwise during freshman year, usually you're in these massive lecture halls for, chemistry 101 or physics 101. So you got to work in these small groups with professors, field trips to different places. So I signed up for the arts focus program, and my master plan was to get to Duke, do that program, and then change my major to art history.
Hmm.
But I realized I was pulling all-nighters writing poetry.
Hmm.
And I felt my classmates, they could just come out with this stuff, but it was such an effort for me and I was really struggling. And then in contrast, the next semester I started my engineering classes and, which was a lot of math, physics, programming. I mean, compared to the arts, it was a breeze. I had time to go out with my friends, do whatever I wanted, and I could.
Pulling all nighters writing poetry. That's hilarious.
Oh, it just does. I love it, but it just is not something I'm good at.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I just enjoy other people's art now.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, look, because I'm fascinated because we talk about right brain, left brain, the creative brain, and of course, be it conditioning, genetics, environment. People gravitate, practice, develop the neural pathways, however it works. But clearly, and again, coming back to Hadouken, just to go back to the website. And of course, we go down. Uh, you and I and David working collectively here, we've all done our personality profiles, and of
Mhm.
course, and your profile showed you're very much able to look at things in a very systematic way and get things done. And that's been what the case in some of the things that we've done. In fact, why don't we do that? We'll go to the LinkedIn profile and just take a look at some of the things that you've been doing so well here, not the least of which is our Ask the Experts program here. You've made all these fantastic things happen in a very logical, systematic way. Just fantastic in terms of the Ask the Experts things. Also, where do we go? We've got the Ask the Experts video that we've got now. Where are they, Stacey? How would I find that
If you can go down to the bottom.
publications?
Yeah, it should be
Okay,
in.
there it is. It
Yep.
Ask the that's the trailer for one of the Ask the Experts. So you've done a great job in the implementation of these things,
Oh,
which
and you
is
taught
which
me
is
a lot as well, Leigh. Notice how I have good lighting today.
you do. It's perfect.
Other
Exactly.
that, which was one of our early videos where I'm half in shadow. I've learned.
Mate, exactly, Brand. So that's a great example of synergy, synchronized energy. What I bring to the table, what you bring to the table, what David brings to the table means that collectively that is a very powerful combination. In terms of me with sales, marketing, David leadership, supply chain management, systems, you in terms of finance, and of course all of us international standards and a systematic approach, and using systems and collective best practice. It really is a powerful tool, which again is why the Ask the Experts project is such a powerful offer to the marketplace. But just on that, in terms of asking you a few things based on the journey, we love talking about leadership and mentoring and critical conversations. Clearly, your mother's conversation around what about staying at home is a pivotal moment. But let's talk about some business or career pivotal moments. Can you recall I'll think of one or two mentors or great leaders or influential leaders in your career, who they were and what they did for you in terms of helping you progress and realize your full potential in the business world. Think of one or two. Give me a story or two.
Okay. The first one I would say, if we're talking kind of about pivotal moments,
Mm,
the first one was really at KPMG. So this was not so much related to a mentor. This was something I unfortunately found out the hard way.
mm-hmm,
But I was put on, so I think I was maybe a year into working at KPMG, still a pretty fresh grad. I had just moved from the financial audit side into the IT side. And I was put on a project where we were doing these big risk and compliance matrices for a client. And the assistant manager on the project that I got on really well with, wonderful lady, she unfortunately was ill. And they put me in charge, temporarily, I was put in charge of this project. And I was just over the moon, oh, they think I'm amazing. They're putting me in charge of this. I'm a fresh grad, but here we go. And I basically, it was too much. I didn't have enough resources. I tried to do it all myself. I didn't ask for help. But I did what I could, and I thought I did a good job. And then we had at KPMG, at the time, at least, your performance was evaluated. All of the more senior people got together and talked about you and gave you ratings in different areas. And my rating was knocked down because of that job. And it was because I hadn't asked for help.
mm,
And a light bulb went off, oh my God, why didn't I tell somebody, we don't have enough people on this. I need help. And I do remember thinking, oh, it's not me it's them. The higher up people decide these things. But they were expecting me to, fair enough, speak up and tell them that I couldn't do everything. So I think that was a lesson that I really, really took to heart after that,
But
speaking
asking for help's
all
not a
over the
weakness.
place. Yeah.
That asking for help's not a weakness. That in fact, they're looking for you to go. Listen, if you're hitting a wall, ask for help rather than waste time or waste time or deliver a substandard result. Yeah.
Exactly. And I do think, I was probably worried that, oh, if I ask for help, yeah, it won't look good. They'll think that I can't handle this. And
Mm,
they gave me this responsibility, but
mm,
it's not a weakness at all. It's asking for help, also recognizing that you can't do everything yourself. And, just like you mentioned the test that we all did, which basically helps you identify what kind of people you need around you.
mm,
That's really the key thing.
mm, mm,
When I was at Intertek, I had some great bosses. I mean, one of them was amazing at getting the right people around him, and that taught me a lot. He was just incredible on the people side. The people side, knowing, being able to predict what people would do in certain situations and making sure they're in the right situations for them to perform. That taught me a lot. Also, my boss, when I was in the mergers and acquisitions department, the head of the corporate development group, he really, really taught me a lot. I mean, he would have us go into all these kind of very senior level negotiations with him, for some of the bigger acquisitions. Even though we didn't necessarily have to be there, he really saw his job as developing us, training us up. And he really was quite inspiring because he would always find a way forward. I mean, these acquisitions can be quite a lot of times, we bought a lot of owner managed businesses. So people have a real emotional connection to this, their baby, they're handing over their baby, or normally we would keep the management on, but it's different when you're not the boss anymore.
mm,
So, and this is the only time for many of these people, they're only going to sell a business maybe once in their life.
mm,
So
mm,
emotions can run very high. It's very easy to kind of just say, okay, it's this is not going to work. But he would always find a way, and he would do it, with grace and humor. And that really, that was something that inspired me, and I modeled the way I dealt with, well, many business problems after that.
In terms of the grace and humor, or in terms of what are some of the characteristics or that you took on from him in terms of you and how you worked in projects after that? What did you consciously change?
It was so what I really consciously changed was more on the solution side. So instead of being so stuck on, this is non-negotiable, finding a solution. And
Mhm.
you really he would come up with things that, I would have never thought of. I think at the time I was probably approaching things in a bit of a black and white manner, when
Yeah,
really there's so much gray to work with when it comes to negotiating a deal. And yeah, he just forced me to kind of think outside of the box, really. Think
yeah.
about how this could work. Don't be so stuck on this one thing. Where could we come together? So
Nice. So he was clearly talking about left side of the brain, right side of the brain. He was clearly a creative person in that let's be creative about this versus no, it can only be this or this. Yeah.
yes, yeah,
Wow, that's a great tip.
exactly. And so many deals that probably would have been derailed were successful because of that, because you can remain firm. You do have some things that are non-negotiables, but there's maybe sometimes there really is no way, but in 90% of the time, if you work hard enough at it, there's a way.
And be creative, as you say, which I made that note. You mentioned the word negotiation a number of times in the conversation so far. And so, as you say, in terms of mergers and acquisition negotiations, from your point of view, if you're going to give me a mini course in negotiation, that is some of the do's and don'ts in successful and unsuccessful negotiation, what would be some of the tips you'd give me or give our listeners in terms of negotiation?
Well, firstly, really listen to the other person. Try to understand the other person. Get
Mhm.
get to know them if you have the chance, outside of just the meeting room.
Mhm.
It a lot depends on the individual's personality. You can understand what is important to them, what may be non-negotiable to them, even if they're not saying it outright. And, they're just stay calm. I think there's a lot to be said just for not getting too wound up and not pissing people off.
Mhm. Yeah.
There is always a way through. I have dealt with some really tricky ones. There have been many where I've just felt myself, the urge to just walk out that door. And sometimes that can be a tactic as well. So I think you have to know the right time to stay there and try to work through something, and when it's better just to leave. And taking a pause is very valuable. So I think before I was working on M&A, I was always kind of like, do, make the decision now, make the decision quick, take quick action. But actually, that isn't always the right way to do things, especially when you're negotiating. And I kind of learned that as I went along, mostly because I was so busy since we were all managing a few acquisitions each. There were times when I just couldn't get back to a seller. And it wasn't because I didn't want to, or because, I didn't want to do the deal. It was because I was, traveling, dealing with another acquisition. And there were so many times when I was on the cusp of conceding to something and my phone would ring and, okay, we can do this. It's all right. So it really made me realize that there's a lot of value in just letting things stew. And that's also a skill, knowing
Mhm.
when you need to do something quickly and when you need to let it stew for a bit.
Let things stew. I like it. I mean, we talk about the process. It's called perturbation, the power of applying heat, and certainly in a sales situation, at times silence is applying heat, or time is applying heat. As you say. But you're reminding me of that song: "Know when to hold them and know when to fold them. Know when to walk away, know when to run." You never count your money while you're sitting at the table. You know, talking about you might have
Yes,
heard that in
exactly.
Texas or Carolina or somewhere.
Yeah.
There's some great tips, Stacey, and just on that, it's got me thinking. What motivates? Clearly, you're a high achiever from a high achieving family. So, what motivates Stacey Varsani? What's your why, particularly when it comes to both business and life?
I just want to feel fulfilled in whatever I do.
Mhm.
That has been, I think initially in the early part of my career, it was more about where I wanted to be geographically
Mm.
and just working hard, just working hard, making everybody happy. Not so much about, what I was doing, what kind of work I was doing.
Mm.
I think now I definitely am more focused on doing work that interests me, that fulfills me. I still am quite, I think I put a lot of pressure on myself to work hard and to get things done and not to let people down, whether they're clients or, I do volunteering work. Some pro bono work. It's no difference to me. I think
Mm.
I like to I like to see things progressing. I like to see companies doing better. I mentor students. I like to see them doing better. And that's really what drives me.
Great, great. Just on that, both in companies when you've been working in or advising or trying to help companies and people, what are some of the things you've seen them do to impede themselves or get in their own way? Handbrakes that they consciously or unconsciously put on themselves.
Oh, there's so many. I mean, I guess one of the easy ones to fix, which we've talked about before, is when functions aren't really talking.
Hmm.
So when there's processes that should be cross-functional that are really happening in isolation, or
Mm.
it's not until the very end of the process that another function is coming in. So for example, if it's the financial reporting process, maybe not the monthly accounts, but just like the weekly financial reporting. Many companies will leave that to finance, but actually, you really need to get the operations involved. Okay, how's the month looking for sales? So those are quite easy fixes, I think, but it's not always when you're in the midst of things, it's not always visible that this is what's happening or this is what has evolved over time. So there's a lot of value, and this is where the processes come in place as well. I think, you mentioned earlier that really kind of best practices, international frameworks really underpin a lot of the work that we do. And that's because the answers to a lot of the issues that companies are having really lie in the systems and the processes. So if you embed the right kinds of systems and processes and really make sure these are fully institutionalized into the business, that's where you can get a lot of value, because things are not the product of one person saying, oh yes, let's do things like, I'm going to do things like this for a while, and then they get replaced and another person comes in and has a different way of doing things. You're consciously adopting best practices and making sure that this is now the system until it is decided that we have a new system that maybe works better. This is what we're doing.
Yeah, and 96. Well, I remember Edwards Deming way back said, 94% of the problems are due to the systems, 6% are due to the people. So stop blaming the people, take a look at the system. But it's so human to blame the person next to you or someone over there rather than hang on, look at this in a very systematic way, which again, from a science engineering point of view, that's much more useful. Again, science makes it predictable. A systematic approach makes it predictable and consistent. Um, so, in terms of your own ongoing learning and mentoring, I always like to ask people what they listen to, what they read. What are you doing in terms of your own mental, intellectual stimulation and learning?
Well, I love podcasts, and I've
Mm.
been listening to yours, Lee.
No, thank you.
I've been listening a lot to there's a podcast called the AI in Business podcast
Hmm.
by Emerge Technologies that I started listening to. I think it was last summer, just because I feel like in order, for any kind of business advisor consultant to really serve their clients properly, you need to you need to keep up to date on best practices, and especially now technology, because there is so much out there that can be leveraged and not very expensively built
Mm.
into processes. So I've been really trying to keep up to date on that. Maybe I don't understand all of it, but it's been a learning experience. Also, speaking to some of the tech companies and trying out their tools and really understanding how this could fit into certain processes that I'm working on has been valuable. Also, I listen to criminal justice podcasts. Yes. So I started the first podcast I ever listened to. I don't know if you know the podcast Serial.
No, it's
It's
called Serial. No.
Serial, Serial.
Hmm.
And it is about a murder that happened in Baltimore years ago, 30, I think about 30 years ago now, where somebody was probably wrongfully convicted. And it just became this massive, it's This American Life, which is an NPR podcast out of the US.
Hmm.
They produced Serial was one of their podcasts. And I was just so hooked. I started a friend of mine from Duke, who's a lawyer, posted something about it. And I was like, oh, if she likes it, this must be good. So I got completely hooked. Then I started listening to This American Life, which has all kinds of, it's like a variety show with all kinds of stories out of the US. And I started listening to another spin-off of, well, inspired by Serial, was another podcast called Undisclosed, where they looked at this case in Serial in more depth, and it was three lawyers who were doing it. So they got quite a bit technical, but I really liked that. And they went on to look at other cases. I think they maybe 10 people they've had their convictions overturned now. So I just find that
Wow.
fascinating. And yeah,
Hmm.
I like to think that it will benefit me if I'm ever wrongfully convicted of something in the US.
Just
I
in
will.
case. Well
Yeah.
done, well done. And of course, if we're talking about leading our best lives, and obviously we say life is family, friends, work, leisure, sport, recreation, mind, body, spirit, wellness. Um, um, how do you manage your life? What time do you get up? What does your day look like? And how do you balance this family, work, leisure, sport, health, mind, body, spirit?
Well, not very well all the time. I mean,
All
I
right.
was just telling you earlier that I haven't gotten enough sleep this week, and I think that's the case almost every week. I think, to be honest, my life is pretty chaotic. Pretty I don't really follow many routines, but I think that's probably quite common for
Hmm.
somebody with kids who are my kids are almost 9 and 12 now, so there's
Yeah,
a lot going on there
it's going to
still.
keep you busy for sure.
Yeah. So I mean, normally I wake up around anywhere between 6 and 7, depending on what kind of activities they have on in the morning, get them ready for school, drop them at school. And then after that, I'll either do, if I have the time, it depends on what meetings I have, but I'll try to take a couple mornings a week where I either go for a run or I play tennis or I play pickleball. So being active is very, like, I really notice it in my mental state if I haven't been active, even just
Mm,
for, a week.
mm,
I really need that kind of activity
mm,
to keep sane.
yeah.
So I do that. And then after that, yeah, it's meetings. I do try to be there for their pickup in the afternoon. So I try to schedule things around that when I can. And then evening is more work, cooking. So unlike many people in Singapore, we do not have a live-in helper. And it's just something that we didn't really feel suited us. So me and my husband we have to be quite organized in terms of coordinating things. I usually do the cooking, he'll do the cleaning. With the kids, if I have a meeting and I can't do it, he'll go and get them. Or we now live in a place where there's a lot of other people from the school that can help out. So yeah, I feel like it's just a lot of juggling stuff, and I do a lot in the evenings as well. So I'm on a couple of committees, and those things are usually in the evening, sometimes sports in the evening, sometimes social stuff. I belong to a book club.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, I week to week, it's very different, but I like that. I've always liked that. And I think that's also why I've stayed in the consulting business now for so long, because you're working on different projects with different clients, you're meeting lots of different people, learning about all sorts of things. And I really like the non-predictability and the non-routine nature of that.
Right. Kind of different to a big organization like KPMG, I imagine, or some of the other bigger organizations you'd been in.
Yeah, well, I guess KPMG was a lot of different projects as well.
Hmm.
But now, I mean, running your own business, you have more control over the scheduling and your time. KPMG was tricky in the sense that, they would come up to me and say, "Okay, tomorrow you're working in Birmingham for the next 3 months."
Oh,
So really, I had no say over, work. There was very little work-life balance. And it's hard to plan things. It's hard to plan for yoga class in the evenings when you know that you could be tapped on the shoulder and told you'll have to spend a few months working somewhere else.
I own you. They own you. Talk about freedom. Talking about that, question I like to ask people is, what does the future look like for Stacey Varsani over the next, say, 1, 2, 3 years?
Well, let's see. I am now, as you know, in the process of really trying to grow the Hadouken brand. So that's really my main focus right now, to grow the business, grow the brand. Really, for the first 10 years of Hadouken, it was just me basically doing freelance work. So people were not hiring the company, they were hiring me. And I found that the balance, it was very tricky to get the right kind of workload. I mean, I was
Mm.
either working way too much, trying to do like two full-time jobs at the same time, or there was not enough work on. It was just very hard to really get it to the right level. So I, am growing the business now, which of course is even more work.
Mm.
And it's a lot of work, obviously, on the marketing side, but I'm really enjoying it. I mean, I feel like that part of it, there's a bit of an outlet for creativity. And, sometimes I actually have to pull myself away from that to go work on some other things, because
Mm.
it is really fun in a way. But it's been a big change for me. I don't naturally, I mean, I didn't really put myself out there at all
Mm.
before. And in fact, I was very uncomfortable about it. I did not use LinkedIn much. I just waited for people to come to me, and then I could decide if it was something I wanted to do or not. But I didn't really reach out at all. I took advantage of what opportunities presented themselves to me, but didn't put myself out there. So I think the first few months of doing this were very uncomfortable for me. I really can't say I enjoyed it much, but now I've really been enjoying it. And to be honest, putting yourself out there, I've reconnected with so many old colleagues from KPMG, from Intertek. I mean, this actually is what led to, me meeting David, because I reconnected with Intertek's ex-CEO of China, and he introduced David and I. And then David introduced me to you. So
Mm.
I think it's yeah, if you don't put yourself out there, these things won't happen, at scale, really.
No, not at all. That's why we talk about the R factor. R factor, we got to radiate to attract. I mean, and you attractive people don't know you exist. Frequency times quality of contact. We literally did do an Hadouken a marketing plan of who's our network. Let's go and do some frequent quality contact there and see what then is generated. So we use some of those principles, which is fantastic. Now I'm going to go through some of the key points I've got here in no particular order. Coming back, I just see a note I made. You said you get so excited about doing your risk and compliance matrices. I said, what the hell? Talk about left brain. No, risk and compliance matrices. But that's on the left brain side. On the right side is that whole. But I learned ask for help. I learned to ask for help, and then those pivotal conversations both with mentors and managers. If we talk about the mentor and manager saying there's always a way in negotiations, let's hang in and let's brainstorm some new options as distinct from black and white, but also that very pivotal conversation with your mum saying, I think you should be a stay-at-home mum. And you've gone, what the hell? Talk about a paradigm shift right there. And then your point around some of the great points you made around negotiation, both in terms of pause, in terms of getting to know the people, rapport. We've actually seen this in some of the work of Robert Cialdini, some of the research on influence showing when you spend that 3, 4, 5 minutes or more developing rapport, getting to know the person, what they found was, firstly, more deals were done, the conversion rate was higher, and the average dollar sale, the average size of the deal was greater because one, you get to know the person more, which again is exactly everything we talk about in our CZ6 color zone system in terms of developing rapport, so you have a better quality conversation, understand the needs way better, and then literally co-create the solution with the client, which exactly was what I was doing on a Zoom call earlier this morning. Your engineering brain, and clearly your scientific dad, but at the same time the influence of your artistic mum. So many great things there, Stacey. And activity, you said activity for your mental state to keep sane. Particularly family, 9 and 12-year-old, husband, work. We've got to look after ourselves. You know, the serotonin, the dopamine, the endorphin, all of these things are so important. And it's easy not to do, but then you're not in the best state to actually handle. And you've already made a point here, the importance of staying calm, both in negotiation, but pretty much in anything. You're going to make better decisions coming from a calm state. And I love that other point you made around that mentor manager. Not only are they creative in negotiations, but saw his job as training and mentoring and developing us. That part of his job was to empower and help his team grow. And your point, letting people stew. It's not a bad strategy. Know when to hold them, know when to fold them. I like that. So, boy, oh boy, KPMG, oil and gas. You really have been the corporate woman. So, Stacey, is there anything we haven't spoken about you'd like to cover, or a point you'd like to make, or a question I should have asked you that you'd like to cover before we wrap up?
The only thing I would say is that in terms of the staying calm, what I've started doing, and this is just in the past year or so, I think I may have mentioned this to you before. If I'm ever feeling a bit worked up about something or anxious about something, I just take a deep breath.
Mm-hmm.
And usually I only have to take one, maybe sometimes two,
Mm-hmm.
but things that would have continued going on in my head just stop instantly. And it's just been such a powerful tool. I think every day there's probably a few times every day where I do that. And, I feel it's really helped with productivity.
Good. I'm so glad to hear it. Of course, one, as I say to people, the Indians have been onto this for between 5 and 40,000 years. Pranayama, the power of breath, different types of breathing, certainly the power of nasal breathing, breathing in for 5. The book, James Nestor, it's called Breath. Such a fantastic book. The power of
That's on my list.
breathing in, hold for 1 or 2, and then breathing out for 5 or 6 seconds, how it slows everything down. And in the area of neuro-linguistic programming, you talk about state. Your emotional state is so controlled by breath, and you want to be anxious, doesn't take long, versus, and as you said, one breath, let alone put 2 or 3 together, how literally we say your world changes in that 1 to 3 breaths. It's
Yes,
fantastic.
like magic.
It
I wish I had discovered this years ago.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and not only that, life doesn't go on for too long when you aren't breathing. It's
That's
very, very
very,
important.
very good point.
Yeah, yeah. So which again is where yoga, certainly my experience doing yoga, and then of course at home, breathing, meditation in the morning, the breath, so important. Stacey, this has been so fantastic talking to you. Let's just go back. People can contact you by going to both your LinkedIn site or the Hadouken. There it is.
Yep.
There, the Hadouken site, folks. So check it out. Empowering organizational resilience, senior experts, lasting value. We keep businesses agile, adaptable, and future ready. So it's all there. Of course, because I've gone to the trailer, I'll go back. I think that I have to go back. There it is to LinkedIn. There you are on LinkedIn as well. So there it is. Book an appointment. Stacey's there. David's there. And so all these latest, as you say, down in the publications section, all the videos that we've put together in recent times, the R factor, the leaking bucket syndrome, and a range of other publications that you've got. Stacey, it's been fantastic talking to you. And I look forward to our next Zoom call. That's the other beautiful thing about a team of consultants, how we're all on the same journey of helping empower organisations together. And in our case, you and me and David, 1 + 1 + 1 is way more than 3. It's more like 10 and 15 and 20. So folks, if you want to actually harness the collective brainpower of Stacey on finance, David on leadership and systems and supply chain, me in the area of sales and marketing, and then all of us in terms of the collective areas that we've worked in right across the Asia Pacific region to help add value and accelerate growth of companies, then do reach out and explore that Ask the Experts session that we offer. And Stacey, from here, you've got some more work to do, and then you've got pickleball, did you say?
Yeah, pickleball this evening, 3 hours of it. Usually I don't schedule tennis and pickleball on the same day, but it happened.
I've got no idea what pickleball is. What is it?
Oh, it's great. You should, it's kind of like paddle. If you've heard of that one, it's
Yes.
a little wiffle ball and a paddle. It's a lot easier on your body than tennis.
Okay. Okay. And would you call yourself competitive?
Yeah, yes. And I actually try to tone that down a bit, but yeah, playing tennis again competitively has really brought out some things in myself that I thought were, long gone years and years ago. So
Yes.
yeah,
Funny about that. I mean, the beautiful thing is there. I love asking that question of here you are, all this achievement, master's degree here, and job here, and work here, and kids, and so clearly the achievement gene is well and truly in there, and clearly from your dad and mum as well. So I love asking people, would you describe yourself as competitive? And competitive people cannot resist because they immediately their mind goes to a competitive situation and they light up like Christmas trees because they and of course I'm not dissimilar myself. I try and pretend I'm not that competitive until somebody wants to compete with me. Uh,
exactly.
it's just bizarre. But there's a great paper from Harvard Business Review looking at the characteristics, the predictive characteristics of successful salespeople. And one is they call it ego drive, but it actually is competitive drive. And they call it desire to conquer. And the other one of that is compete ego and empathy. Ability, as you said, read the other person, connect with the other person, but don't lose sight of what your objective is, which
Yes.
is to do the deal. In a win-win way, of course. You're not going in there, you want to do it in an ethical, moral, legal way, but it's not, oh, they said no, or they said they're a bit too tired today, or whatever. It's like, no, I'm hanging in here because it's called game on, baby.
Yep, eye on the prize.
Eye on the prize, exactly, exactly. So, Stacey, let's keep the eye on the prize with Hadouken, keep the eye on the prize in helping people in our Ask the Expert session, and we'll continue to grow Hadouken and grow our client businesses, as you say, accelerate the value. Thanks so much for your time today, and I'll see you again very soon.
Yeah, see you. Thanks so much, Leigh.
Bye.
Bye.